Hope you all enjoyed your Thanksgiving weekend and stuffed yourself like I did and had some R&R, rest and relaxation. But tomorrow is Monday. And Monday, we go back to the grind, right? What we've been calling it here, the slog. We go back to that and we will battle, won't we? We will battle through. We will battle through fatigue of our weary bodies, aches and pains, battle through traffic, battle through the demands and obligations of whatever responsibilities you have, battle with people, coworkers, neighbors, family members. We go to battle. Strap up our boots, lace up our dress shoes, or if you're lucky enough to work from home, put on our slippers or Crocs or whatever, and we go to battle. The Bible describes that struggle in a lot of different ways, and one of the ways is by referring to it as a race. And in our passage this morning in Hebrews 12, it talks about a race. And this is not a sprint. This is not a 100-meter dash. This is a marathon. And it is custom made, personally designed by your Creator God for you. You have yours to run, I have mine to run, and God is up to good in it. And God is ever present, He is with us, and He is helping us. And that's what we're going to see this morning as we look at this passage in Hebrews 12. If you would read it with me again. I know Brian just read it a few moments ago, but if you just read it with me again and notice this emphasis on this endurance race that we're running, okay? So beginning in verse 1, it says, "Therefore, since we have so great a cloud of witnesses surrounding us, let us lay aside every encumbrance and the sin which so easily entangles us, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and has sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. For consider him who has endured such hostility by sinners against himself, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. You have not resisted to the point of shedding blood in your striving against sin, and you have forgotten the exhortation which is addressed to you as sons. My son, do not regard lightly the discipline of the Lord, nor faint when you are reproved by him. For those whom the Lord loves, he disciplines, and he scourges every son whom he receives." Now, before we look at this passage in detail, let me remind you of the context. We've been in Hebrews for a while now, but just a little refresher for you. The Hebrews to whom the writer was writing this book, this letter, this exhortation, the ones to whom he was writing were struggling in a variety of ways, and one of the most significant ways was that they were living within an area where there was persecution out of the Roman government. Okay, there was oppression, there was increasing hostility and opposition because Christians were deemed a threat to the empire, and thus they had to be dealt with and put down and controlled. And so they were suffering. And the temptation amidst their suffering was to return to the false sense of security of Judaism and the community of the Jewish people. If they would just abandon Jesus, the simplicity and singularity of faith in Christ, if they would just abandon him and go back to all the rituals and relics and rites of their former religion, then they could potentially relieve themselves and secure themselves. And so they were tempted in that way. And the author, as we've been seeing throughout, is appealing to them and appealing to us to stay focused on Jesus, to trust in him, because it's always been about faith. And that's what the reminder was from chapter 11 that we've been looking at for several weeks. In chapter 11, over and over, we see that all these different Old Testament saints, even before the time of Jesus, well before the time of Jesus, for them too, it was about faith. It was about trusting God and God alone. They were looking forward to the unseen promises and provisions of God. They were going through immense difficulty and struggle and hardship and threat, They were living through life and death types of situations. And in their life and death types of matters that they were dealing with, they were being taught to trust in God and God alone. That's what God was doing in their lives. So it's been consistent really throughout the history of God's people, throughout the Bible. It's the same thing as we encounter these situations in which it's a struggle of life and death, which a long race kind of is that. It's that kind of long struggle, right? In that type of situation, we're being taught to trust in God and God alone, and to trust in, most specifically, Jesus Christ, the embodiment of all the promises and all the provisions of God. And we're going to talk about what it means and what it looks like to trust in Jesus in this race, okay? But as we run our race, as we're going to move through the passage, we're going to look at these activities, okay? Several activities by which we run this race. But notice, first of all, in verse 12, verse 1, therefore, he says, since we have so great a cloud of witnesses surrounding us, and that cloud of witnesses is all the people mentioned in chapter 11, those who went before us and who also learned to trust in God and God alone. So he says, we have this great cloud of witnesses, and having them behind us, and having the clear instructions regarding faith, here are the things that are involved in running this race. First of all, laying aside burdensome weights, okay? Laying aside burdensome weights. Begin at verse 1, where it says, after the witnesses are mentioned, let us lay aside every encumbrance. I know some of you have the ESV there. It says, I think, weights. Like, lay aside weights. Now, if you've ever run, and if you run a long distance, you know that you want to keep it light in terms of what you wear, right? Oftentimes, runners will wear as little as possible. Unless you're in the military and you have a backpack or something like that, heavy weight you're carrying, you want to keep it as light as you can. Well, what types of weights were they struggling with? Well, as we said, they were tempted, first of all, to go back to religion with all its obligations and demands. They felt like they could negotiate through that way. And the author's saying, look, that's deception. That's not really going to help you. That's just a weight on you. You're putting things on yourself. You're your own worst enemy. You think you're going to somehow relieve yourself, secure yourself, save yourself, and you're only doing harm to yourself. And that's the case for all of us, isn't it? We have ways of doing harm to ourselves. We have the race that we're running. We have the course, which is usually pretty confusing. All sorts of twists and turns. I'm thinking of someone who's running around a track that maybe goes around a football field. It's very clear, more simple, kind of know what's ahead of you, versus a cross-country race where you're on this trail and it's ups and downs and ditches and roots to trip over. It's more like that kind of race, isn't it? And as we run that kind of race, he's saying, look, don't unnecessarily burden yourself. Well, how do we unnecessarily burden ourselves? Well, when we are believing fundamentally that the victory, that the completion of this race is up to us, that somehow, like, we're the originator, we're the ones with the plan, we're the ones with the knowledge, we're the ones that have to ensure all the outcomes we want. That's an impossible burden that we place upon our own shoulders. Whether through our own religiosity that we get sucked into, thinking that we can somehow just negotiate that way, or other types of distractions or pleasures that we pursue that only end up hurting us so often. But there are ways that we burden ourselves. And underneath it all is this thought, this belief that goes back to kind of our fallen nature, which is this lie that tells us that our ultimate well-being is up to us. It's a weight, weighs us down. The race is hard enough, and we make it harder. I was joking earlier about Monday and what Monday represents, but the reality is you could be sitting here right now. You don't have any responsibility. I'm the one up here working right now, so to speak. You're just sitting there listening, but yet you may have things in your mind that are irritating to you, things you're uncomfortable with, things you're nervous about. Things you're frustrated. I don't know, maybe you had a very difficult Thanksgiving. Maybe there's some conflict in your family. It's amazing. We can be resting physically, but not resting mentally, right? And so often it's that we're just heaping burdens upon ourselves because fundamentally we believe that it's up to us and our sense of control over our own lives, over other people. And the book of Hebrews has been urging us throughout to learn to rest. I said earlier, be diligent to enter his rest, to learn to rest. So even as we run this race, this taxing, difficult race, ironically, we're learning to rest in the middle of the race. Remember Jesus' words where he says, "Come unto me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, burdened, weighed down." And he says, "And I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you, learn of me, for I am meek and lowly in heart, and you shall find rest for your souls." So he says, as we run this race, we're laying aside burdens. Next, he talks about laying aside the sin which so easily entangles us. As we've studied this book together, we've been seeing that the sin that is in the crosshairs of the author and in the crosshairs of God, that God is addressing most pointedly, is the sin of unbelief. That's what plagued the Israelites as they wandered in the wilderness. That's the sin that plagues us at the deepest level. It's similar to what we talked about a few moments ago. It's this fundamental belief that our well-being, that our sense of satisfaction and significance and security in this world is up to us and what we can get for ourselves, whether religiously or irreligiously. We're trying to accomplish this, to take care of ourselves, to rescue ourselves, to save ourselves. It's that sin that God is addressing and saying, lay it aside. It so easily, in my version, it so easily entangles you. It's close and it bends around you and winds you up. And when you're running a race, it's not ideal to have things tied around you. And he says, look, everything that you're looking to, everything that you're trusting in to rescue you is only entangling you. It's only the truth that can set you free. And the truth is, which we've been seeing throughout Hebrews, the truth is Jesus is all sufficient for you. He's enough for you. He loves you. He's with you. He's for you. He understands you. He's taking care of you, but we look to so many other things. The obvious, the forbidden forms of sin, whether sexual sin or substance abuse of some kind or reckless living of some kind, could be the obvious version. We just plunge into destruction that way, or the less obvious, the things which are permissible but also become enslaving, our cravings for approval, our cravings for respect, our cravings for food and for drink, things which are good and even appropriate in their right context and yet become inordinate in our lives, excessive and thus enslaving. Anything we look to be our Savior other than Jesus will end up being our slave master. It'll entangle us. I've talked to so many people over the years, and I have my own version of this as well. My own suffering of my own making. But I've talked to people who through tears have told me, hey, I never thought I would end up an alcoholic. Never saw it coming. But I just couldn't. Life was just hard. My marriage was falling apart. Hated my job. And the only thing that got me through was that little bit of relief that I got with the booze. And then it became my master. Mentally dependent upon it, biochemically dependent upon it. That's what happens in all sorts of areas. And no one ever sets out and says, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to become an alcoholic. No one ever says that. No one ever says, I'm going to become a greedy, miserly, uptight monster. No one ever says that. No one ever says, I'm going to live my life enslaved to the approval of other people. No one ever says that. We just sort of end up there, don't we? We just sort of end up enslaved. And underneath it all is unbelief. Underneath it all is our blinders. Underneath it all is our fundamental belief that it's still up to us to take care of ourselves, to complete ourselves. It's a lie, and God loves us enough to address it as we run this race. And he tells us in so many different ways, whatever you're looking to other than Jesus, whatever it is that you feel like is going to get you through this struggle of life and death other than him, it's a false savior. It cannot rescue you. God says, only I can do that for you. All this cloud of witnesses, Abel and Enoch and on, Noah and Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and Joseph and Moses and on and on and on and on. They were all learning that same thing. As you struggle through life, as you wrestle through the burdens and hardships and difficulties and even opposition, God says, you can trust me. In fact, I'm the only one you can trust. We want to trust ourselves. We want to trust our resources. We want to trust other people. We want to trust our bank account or our 401k. Sometimes, even in an unhealthy way, we want to trust the institution of the church or something else. We want to trust anyone, anything that we think can help us, and all the while God's saying, look, the reality is when it comes to the matters of life and death, I'm the only one you can trust. And we'll get more clear on this as we move along. But next, he talks about running with endurance, So after he says, laying aside the sin which so easily entangles us, he says, let us run with endurance the race that is set before us. That word endurance is a familiar word. It comes up often in the New Testament and has to do with remaining under the pressure. Some of you have run long distances before. Even if you have not, you can conceive of it and understand what it involves. But as you're running, the longer you go, usually the harder it gets. You can get in the zone. I've run some long races before in my life, and there's some places where you can kind of coast for a little while and you kind of feel like you're in the zone. But especially as it goes on and on, you get to those latter miles, you just start to feel the fatigue. As your body is struggling, as your body, in a sense, if you didn't stop and get water and food for yourself, like you literally would die. Like you have to do that, but so you're feeling almost like the dying of your body. Ironically, it's not even the course that makes it hard. It's not the distance or the other people around you that make it the hardest. What makes it the hardest is you're running with a physical, mortal body that's limited. And you keep struggling with that, from your heart to your muscles. Your sense of endurance is being tested, right? That's what makes it hard. So he says, run with endurance. Expect that is going to be part of it in this race that is set before us. Next, notice he says in verse 2, fixing our eyes on Jesus. Fixing our eyes on Jesus himself, whom he calls the author and perfecter of faith. We just sang a song, Turn Your Eyes Upon Jesus, kind of a new spin on a familiar old tune. We're familiar with the concept. We can think in terms of like actual seeing. We can think in terms of like visualizing Jesus, or maybe you've seen certain portrayals of Jesus. We don't know exactly what he looked like, of course, but you can think of the different pictures. different actors who have portrayed Jesus over the years. And so we read this and we think about like the images of who Jesus is, but there's something much deeper here. When it says fixing our eyes on Jesus or looking to Jesus, it's not just about like visualizing him. Sometimes we can think in sort of superstitious ways about it, and there are all different versions of how people do these sorts of things where we have little crucifixes or other likenesses, and this just goes much deeper than that. This is about realizing who he is, remembering who he is as we struggle along in the race. Remembering that, as the book of Hebrews began telling us, he's the creator of all things. He's the image of the invisible God. He's the one who has made purification of our sins. He's the one who's guaranteeing that we have a home that we are going to in the future. He is the one who has, in every way we need most, who has taken care of us. It calls him here the author and perfecter of faith. Different interpretations of this, but it has to do with him being the originator, the completer, the pioneer, the perfecter of our faith. The one who initiates it and the one who finalizes it. One understanding of this has to do with the fact that he went before us, and there's a sense in which it's like he is with us and even coming behind us, like he's the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. And we belong to him. Because of God's kindness to us, he belongs to us. I mean, he is the greatest possible leader, the most sacrificial, loving, purely motivated, has your good interest at every moment. He is that person in your life. And like the saints of old in Hebrews 11 who were looking to the unseen, like they were seeing the unseen, they knew there was better things to come. This is describing us seeing the unseen Jesus, seeing with the eyes of faith. We walk by faith, not by sight. Seeing Jesus, being aware of who he is, amazed by who he is, reflecting on his life, his death, his resurrection for us, and what all of it entails and what it all accomplished. Being the greatest leader you and I could ever have. There's a scene in a movie called We Were Soldiers. Some of you may have seen that movie years ago. It's about Vietnam, and it features a strong military leader played by Mel Gibson. And there's this really powerful scene in which Mel Gibson is speaking to his soldiers. And I want you to hear what he says to them as they prepare to go into battle. This is what he says. But this I swear before you and Almighty God, that when we go into battle, I will be the first to set foot on the field, and I will be the last to step off. And I will leave no one behind. Dead or alive, we will all come home together. And as I recall, there's a scene in the movie in which you see his boots touching the ground, stepping off the helicopter there in Vietnam, and in the end, his boots being the ones that are last to step off the ground and back onto the helicopter. A portrayal of the most sacrificial, the most capable, the best type of military leader, and yet pales in comparison to what this text is describing as Jesus went before us, Jesus comes behind us, Jesus was tempted in all ways that we are tempted, yet without sin. Jesus could feel the tug, he could feel the draw to sin, but never succumbed to it, always trusted his Father. And now he says, you can trust me. I'm before you, I'm behind you, I'm with you, I'm the originator, I'm the author of your faith, and I'm the completer of your faith. I'll see you through to the end. We can trust him. He goes on with more detail about what Jesus went through. It says, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, the torturous experience of crucifixion. It says, despising the shame. And there was plenty of that heaped upon him. And has sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. All that he went through before ascending back to his Father. Then it says, verse 3, consider him who has endured such hostility by sinners against himself, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. You've not resisted to the point of shedding blood in your striving against sin. So pause there for a moment. He's saying, look, one of the things that makes this race so hard is that as we run this race, there is hostility, opposition from other people around us, other sinners who sin against us. Jesus, in his case, was an innocent victim, hated by his creatures. He came to his own, and his own received him not. Even his closest followers, even his disciples, abandoned him in his darkest hour, his most difficult days. Jesus himself, all that he went through, all this hostility, Jesus as a victim, and he yielded to it in the plan of his Father, and he says to us, look, I know that it's hard. When you're persecuted, when you're sinned against, when you're experiencing the hostility of others, it is inevitable in this world. We are sinners surrounded by sinners. We will be hurt, and we will hurt. We will be victimized, and we will victimize. It's harder for us to grasp and realize that second part, but it is true. And he says, look, he understands all of this and all the pressures, the external pressures, the internal pressures. And he says, in all of that, look to me. Trust in me. He's the one with a pure heart. He's the one who endured all these hardships righteously. He's the one who trusted his Father all the way through from beginning to end. He's the one we're being taught to trust in. Not ourselves, but in him. And so we get to our final activity here related to this race that we are running. And it is remembering our Father's discipline. Remembering our Father's discipline. Now, this is where the needle goes off the record, okay? If you keep in mind what we just talked about, the hostility of sinners against you, whether it be persecution, as in their day, where they were hated because of their beliefs and their associations, or just someone who's hostile toward you or wronged you or condemning you, hurting you in some way. This is where the needle goes off the record. Because look what he says in verses 5 and 6. And you have forgotten the exhortation which is addressed to you as sons. My son, do not regard lightly the discipline of the Lord, nor faint when you are reproved by him. For those whom the Lord loves, he disciplines, and he scourges every son whom he receives. You realize what this is saying? There's another word for persecution or even hostility of others against you. That word is discipline. It's discipline. I mean, I want you to just do this with me for a moment, okay? Think in your mind, who is opposing you? Who has hurt you the most? Maybe recently, maybe a long time ago? I would imagine most of you have someone, maybe a group of people in your mind. Unless you're real young in here, you probably have at least one person, maybe a number of people who have opposed you, they've harmed you. And God doesn't make light of that, and he doesn't just somehow discount that it's sin. He doesn't ignore that. But in the mysterious ways in which he operates, he says that is discipline in your life. And you're like, well, yeah, but it hurts pretty bad, God. And he says, yeah, scourging hurts. But when it's coming from a loving authority, it's for your what? It's for your good. Now that just rolls right off the tongue. So easy to say. It's so hard to believe, isn't it? It is for me. Look, I go through something hard, especially when it involves the sin of other people, and I want out, and I want relief, and I want revenge, and I want whatever, and I cry, victim! God, do you see what these people are doing to me? Do something about this. And he says, I am doing something. You're my son, and I love you, my cherished child. And you're looking to all sorts of things and all sorts of people to be for you more than they can ever be. And I'm weaning you off the things of this world and showing you where your true treasure is. I'm teaching you that I'm the only one you can trust, really. Deepest levels. It's interesting. Sometimes God teaches us these things through ease and pleasure. Sometimes, not usually. I saw this morning, I think Diane Scott's in here somewhere, I think. She shared this morning. Paul Tripp, a good biblical counselor, said, if you had every one of your dreams, your searching heart would still only be satisfied in Jesus. It's true. You could have every single thing we've ever wanted and would still be unsatisfied. It would still not be enough. And sometimes God teaches us that by allowing us to have things. What we're talking about in Hebrews 12 is, what about when it's the hardest things? What about when it's coming through loss? What about when it's coming through betrayal of people? What about when someone is sinning against me? God says, look, I'm still up to good. And even that word discipline has like a negative connotation, but it's instruction for our benefit, for our good. And we're going to see that more next week in the following context because he continues to develop that idea. But I just want us to understand as we run this race, which has been uniquely designed by your Creator for you specifically, custom made for you, he's up to good even in the opposition you experience. Because while we tend to externalize the evil, we all do it. It's like the other people, it's the government, it's other governments, it's AI, it's whatever, right? And we're not wrong. Technically, there's like truth there. But God is saying, but what plagues you the most at the deepest level, and this is what's hardest for us to believe, is your own sense of pride and entitlement and victimhood and the narratives that you spin. And you don't even realize it, but you're hurting other people as you operate out of those instinctive interpretations. You don't even realize it, but you are. And he's saying, I'm teaching you to trust in me and me alone. And that's not natural for you. And so you go through these things just like the people in Hebrews 11 to show you he's the only one you can trust. Like God is really big and we're really small. And if you're theologically minded, you may be analyzing this and saying, wait a minute, what? Like you saying God is responsible for sin? Like God's the author of evil? Nope. No, I'm not. Like sinners sin, and that's on them. However, there is a sovereign orchestrator over all things who, while he hates sin and what it does to all of us, he is moving things toward redemptive ends, and he is even orchestrating things and even steering things for good. We see it all throughout the Bible. You see it with Joseph and his story, betrayed by his brothers. And at the end of that account, Joseph says, what you intended for evil, God intended for what? For good. You see it with God's people Israel in the Old Testament as they're opposed by other nations, the Egyptians and the Philistines and the Assyrians and the Babylonians and over and over and over again. And God says, look, I'm orchestrating all of this to teach you to trust in me. And it's the same for us today. They will give an account. They will be That sin will be dealt with in God's way and His timing, but for right now, God says, I'm up to something inside of you. Teaching you, helping you, healing you. So, the writer, quoting from Proverbs 3, says this is discipline. And whom the Lord loves, He disciplines. I am approaching 50. I didn't know who laughed, but thank you for that. Some of you are, it's nothing, you're just getting started. Others, you say, "Ooh, that guy's old." Life's weird that way. Approaching 50, and I've been, someone just say, go to 100. I appreciate that. So, some approaching 100. Congratulations. Oh, I could approach 100? Yeah, I don't think, I want to go home. You know what I mean? Like, my body hurts enough at 50. I'm ready to, I know that sounds morbid and negative. Sorry. Where was I? 50. Thank you for that. That's where I was. You're right. It's where I'm about to be. Listen, I don't want to think, not only am I almost 50, but I'm also, in case you haven't heard, a pastor by profession. That's my profession. Yeah, you don't have to, don't clap for that. I don't know what to make of it. What is happening right now? All right, just track with me for a second. Appreciate that. It's the first time anyone's ever clapped after hearing the word pastor, but thank you for that. And I counsel people. Do I get an applause for that too? Counsel, yeah, there you go. Yeah, this is wild. Here's where I'm going. I don't want to think that I still need discipline from my father. I don't. I like to be in the expert's chair. But until we're home, and even when we get home, we're not the authority in that sense. And so God is teaching me. And it's through struggle, and often when it involves sin, that here's what happens. It's like I'm encountering sin and bumping against sin, and guess what comes out of me? Go ahead, you can say it. Sin. Thank you. Yeah, yes. The darkest, most deceptive, most insecure, most arrogant, most entitled, most self-serving, most others exploiting parts of me just come out. And for all that ugliness, God says, trust me. So I want to close with this. This is one of my favorite books called The Reason for God, Belief in an Age of Skepticism by Tim Keller. He has so many good examples, and one that he takes from the classic A Tale of Two Cities. Some of you have probably read that. I think I read it years ago. But just listen to his summary, and it gives us a great illustration of the point of everything that we've just read. And so just hear this, okay? In this story, A Tale of Two Cities, there are these two important characters, Charles Darnay and Sidney Carton. And they look very much alike. And they both love the same woman, Lucy Manette. Lucy chooses and marries Charles. Sorry, Sidney. And they have a child together. The setting of the story is the French Revolution, and Charles, who is a French aristocrat, is arrested, imprisoned, and sentenced to die by guillotine. At the end of the novel, Sidney, who is English, visits Charles the night before he is to be executed. He offers to exchange places with him. Charles refuses, but Sidney has him drugged and smuggled him away into a waiting carriage. Then Sidney takes Charles's place. Charles and his family escape afterward to England. That night in the prison, a young seamstress who is also condemned to die, comes up to Sidney and begins to converse with him, thinking him to be Charles. When she realizes that it is not him, her eyes widen and she asks, "Are you dying for him?" Sidney responds, and his wife and his child, "Hush, yes." The seamstress then confesses that she is terribly frightened and is not sure she will be able to face her death. She asks the brave stranger if he will hold her hand to the end. When the time comes, they go to death hand in hand. She finds herself composed, even comforted and hopeful, as long as she keeps her eyes on him.